Okay. Thank you all for being here. My name is William Palmer. This is a webinar on master data management titled Clean Master Data Doesn't Have to Be Difficult nor Expensive. This very closely resembles a presentation that I've given at a couple of user groups, Oracle applications user groups primarily, and I've gotten some good positive feedback from that, and I think that this is a topic that is as timely as it's ever been, so we will get started. Okay, so today's agenda, I'll start by briefly introducing myself and Hamiltonian Systems, the company that I work for, before diving into the topic today. We'll start by defining master data, the types and elements of master data, as well as talking about why maintaining clean master data is important. Of course, approaching this topic, you have to first establish that this is something that is worthwhile and worth your time. And I think by being on today, you probably understand to some degree why it's important. But we'll go over that quickly and then talk about the challenges of master data management. So I'll draw a little bit on some of our clients or projects that we've seen and the difficulties that companies face with the complicated architecture of applications and the various challenges that happen in any project implementation, and then we'll talk about how to approach it properly, our philosophy, which consists of 4 pillars of master data management. And finally, I'll talk a little bit about how to succeed with master data management, and then some ways that we've seen it go wrong, as well as a little teaser on a webinar that we'll be doing I believe in January or February, called Building a Business Case. And I'll talk briefly about how to build the business case for master data management. And then we'll wrap up with some questions, which you can, I believe, type at any time, though I will make sure that that's the case in a moment. Yes, so questions should be open. So anytime you have something, feel free to write in there and I'll try to address them at the end. Okay, here we go. So about Hamiltonian Systems. Hamiltonian Systems is an Oracle Gold partner. We sit on the field advisory and customer advisory boards in maintenance and manufacturing, both for on-premise and cloud. We have been working in this space for now coming up on 18 years, founded by Ravi Venkatraman, who had an extensive experience working with implementations and other Oracle, primarily Oracle-related projects. He was formerly with Deloitte and did independent work and saw some of the issues that we're going to talk about today with how projects have gone wrong, how companies are struggling to maintain high-quality data. And he dedicated himself to trying to fix that problem, which then resulted in a suite of tools which he developed primarily initially for service work, and then realized that the power of placing those tools in the hands of customers is higher than he can manage with just service contracts. So we have a suite of tools which include Kaseya, our data management platform, as well as Moongil, which is an IoT, small-scale IoT platform, and a few other products around mostly asset management, manufacturing, other supply chain issues. We are headquartered here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and we have folks spread across the US and a software development team both here and in India. As for myself, my name is William, either one. I was formerly with GE Power. That was my primary Oracle experience. And I'm a little bit of an example of some of the, I guess the writing on the wall for companies in adapting to the modern problems and upgrading and investing in technology. Because a lot of my work at GE was working with master data. I was in asset and inventory management, primarily in a finance role, but I spent a lot of my time essentially cleaning up issues with bad data. It was trying to track down why did this multi-million-dollar internal transaction not go through, and it'll be little issues in basically data quality. This exists at, I think, any organization, but it became especially frustrating for me to be feeling like I was mostly plugging holes rather than trying to address, or rather bailing out water rather than plugging the holes and figuring out where is the source of these problems. And so what it was there was just a lack of investment in master data management and in data quality. And so right now I'm working in business development, supporting our clients and trying to help supply chain partners adapt and invest without having to spend a lot of money on a major platform and then see that not come to fruition, not see the ROI. So we're focused on using our expertise and our tools to create very personalized, customized solutions for our clients. So defining master data. Master data are, and it depends a little bit on the business specifically, but master data are essentially pieces of data that are used across business functions and across applications and processes. For many, I think for nearly all businesses, customer is a common master data. It'll be used by sales and marketing, by billing. It's important to know your customer's interaction with your product. And so that's a common starting place for when companies start to address the need for master data. But essentially, in a lot of cases, master data will be housed in multiple applications and across the business and across regions as well. And therein lies some of the challenge of master data management is you want to be able to refer to the same piece of data regardless of whether you're in your CRM or in EBS. And so for some businesses, some certain pieces of data may be considered transaction data, and for others, it may be master data or reference data. So locations, right, you may want to master based on a plant or perhaps on items. Employees are a common piece of master data. So these are really the lifeblood of any business. This is how you can get a view into the business, the best view into the business. And again, just to re-up, it's duplicated inside several systems. And so in some cases, those systems never interact, but they're still referring to the same piece of data. And in some cases, it'll also be housed in Excel spreadsheets or in in-house tools or in little one-off applications. And so that's going to be sort of the setup of a common problem with master data management. So in a data management context here, there's a lack of what you call a single source of truth or a golden record for a piece of master data. This is an accurate piece of data that has the relevant fields brought together and can be a one view for whatever that piece of master data is. This is what organization leaders use to make strategic decisions, understanding the relevant pieces of data around their master data in one single view, not that the information that somebody has on their customer, John Smith, is different in their CRM than it is in their billing, but rather that they have one reliable source of truth. And this is a problem across most businesses, and it's something that is a little bit of an iceberg in terms of the visibility of this problem is sometimes lower than what it actually is. So there's the top piece of the iceberg sticking out, and the much larger, I think it's 90% of it, is below water. So a common complaint from executives will be a lack of real-time or recent insights into pieces of business, right? Their lines of business, their products, their customers, and in some cases that gets thrown to IT, or there isn't a clear understanding of why they aren't getting the sort of key insights that they need. And in a lot of cases, what that is a lack of proper master data management and that golden record, and linking your pieces of data from the various silos together to be able to get a holistic view. And so that is starting to be addressed by businesses, and it's taking off, as you see here, 38%, compared to, I think it was 18% or 20% the year before, who said that master data management projects are a priority. And then trusted data, again, on this piece of golden records, it needs to be relevant and fresh and accurate. You can't have duplicates, where then you have certain pieces of transaction linked to one record and certain transactions linked to another. And this is really key for making fast and important decisions. As markets, change, if you are not able to key on a specific region or a specific customer or a specific customer type to be able to get a holistic view into what's going on, you're not going to be able to make adaptive decision making. And so this is going to mean that that IT and business units are going to have to come together to address this problem and figure out how to share data across the enterprise. And so we'll touch on the various pieces of that. But what this has really meant for companies that have properly addressed master data management is that they can typically cut costs and get really specific insights into their business where they might not have realized an underperforming area or a customer that or customer segment that they could address a specific need which they weren't addressing. So it's a little bit of the importance for the future. All of these, major technology innovations that are on the horizon or that are already arriving, which are often the topics of webinars you'll get emails about in your inbox, these are all useless unless you have quality data. Artificial intelligence is a major game changer, there's no doubt about it, but artificial intelligence is essentially a complicated algorithm which needs to be trained. And in order to be trained, it requires data, and in order to be trained properly, it requires good data. Bad data will essentially create a bad algorithm, which can be more damaging than beneficial because it will give you what appears to be really interesting, great insights, but it may not have the full picture if it's consuming junky data. And at that point, there's no going back. So this is something that businesses need to address now, yesterday, today, tomorrow, in order to take advantage of these game-changing technologies. Likewise with cloud, cloud is sort of the solution. It can appear to be the solution to the problem if you adopt an entirely cloud-based suite of applications, where then you might eliminate a little bit of the silos and be able to poise yourself better from a technology standpoint to sharing data across your applications. But again, what happens if you're an organization, a business that's been in business for 30, 40, 50, 60 years, and you have all this legacy data that you're carrying with you into the cloud? Likewise, in the data creation process, if you haven't figured out the human process, mapped it out, then the new technology isn't going to save you. And robotic process automation likewise requires there to be a proper, easily followable path that a piece of data takes from start to finish. And it also requires well-organized and dependable master data. And again, this is just to reiterate, I think I've touched on many of these, but you'll often find, and I know for some of you in the call, this will feel a lot like your situation, that there are processes that aren't well documented. It's not clear who owns a piece of data. It's not clear even necessarily what fields are required. Forget, working on the same process in the US versus in Asia and in Europe. Data is held separately, often in legacy systems that aren't properly integrated with all the applications that people are using. So there's a lot of problems here that need to be addressed in order to create proper master data management. And again, re-upping that this is a problem that C-suite executives are starting to identify. Still, I think much less than they should, but they are realizing that in approaching any data-related project, they're having a massive problem with data quality. And in many cases, the tools piece also, almost 30% saying they have ineffective tools. And that's important as well, because a lot of what happens in master data management also requires a proper interface, though that's not necessarily the most important part. Sometimes you do need to introduce a tool in order to guide the process. So, approaching the solution. This is the 4 pillars of master data management that we at Hamiltonian Systems look at when we're approaching data management. So, there's data, of course, process, technology, and governance. Not necessarily in that order, but these are sort of the key pieces, each one needing to be addressed in order to create a proper master data management project and to have success in that. And so speaking first of data, which is the key entry point, this is what we're focused on. Data, these are the sort of 5 dimensions of data that we talk about at Hamiltonian Systems. And then there's I think 17 subsets of these dimensions. So availability is, I'd refer to that a little bit, but that's, if you want to be able to understand, okay, bring me this customer's information, and you only have their information from 2014 backwards, and everything else has been housed in a new system, that's going to cause problems. Likewise, the reliability of that data is a huge problem for a lot of companies right now. Data quality doesn't get as much of a look as other areas of the business, though it can be a huge problem in the background. And then also presentation, right? How are you receiving data? Some of that might be in a third, a next tool, a data crunching tool, a business intelligence tool. But it's important that the structure and the hierarchy and the timeliness of data is also all there. So a little bit about data architecture. This is a good example of the various silos that house master data. And so each one is working on certain pieces, and the other pieces of that data, while it might help them to have access to it, currently they do not, and they'll work on the pieces that they have, and without a proper master data management tool or without a proper master data management approach, it's going to be difficult to understand centrally, to get that golden record that you see down below. So matching rules are one way that MDM creates a golden rule. Matching rules are trying to figure out what are the pieces. So if you've decided you want to master, let's say, a customer, so what are the pieces of customer data that will help you to match the record in your CRM versus in your marketing versus in your finance? And so that's a process in and of itself, and that can be a technology process, but it also requires business folks who understand their silo and their system, and they understand what piece of data is going to be most unique. And so in some cases, take customer as an example. You want to pay attention to what are the pieces you're using, what are the pieces you're trying to create matching rules around. Let's say perhaps email is what you determine to be something that is held in the records across the business and is the most reliable piece to create a unique identifier, or it's address, let's say, and then you have to create fuzzy matching rules, which include a little bit of leeway for human error, or the difference between, street ST versus written out street. So matching rules are an important technology process that also require business input and the input of people who understand their area of the business. And human in the loop is a piece of this matching process that isn't necessarily, it's case by case, right? So for certain things, let's say you go into a hospital and you're getting a surgery on your knee, you may want to have a human there to review before you go into surgery that you are the same person, the same John Smith that is supposed to receive a surgery on their left knee, not a different John Smith that is coming in tomorrow for surgery on the right knee. And so in certain situations, it does make sense for a human to be a part of the matching process, to understand that, or in some cases, even you want a human in the loop for just outlier cases, where fuzzy matching said, okay, this looks like a match, but we're not 100% sure. Kick that to a data steward who can then validate the match. And an important piece of the golden record is that it can be used to look up that piece of master data by end user applications. So whatever the piece is that it is mastered around should be keyable, searchable by end using applications. And again, this is a situation where you want to have proper integration with your applications and your MDM solution. And then it's important to also talk about the roles of different people in the business towards data creation. Certain organizations that are further ahead in data governance maturity may already have defined data governance teams or defined data stewards. Others may not. Others may have data stewards who are going by a different name, or for whom it's part of their job but not their whole job. But it is really important to understand, when you're mapping out the data creation process, who's creating the data, what are the pieces of data that what are the elements of data that they are responsible for, and then who is making sure that, who's a subject matter expert making sure that each of those pieces are properly being filled in, and that the right people are reviewing the right data and passing it along in the process, in the workflow. And then in this process of reviewing data, it is important, of course, to lean heavily on the business folks, because they're going to understand what pieces of data, what elements of, let's say, again, for the sake of consistency, customer data, what's going to be the necessary fields, and thinking about the whole, the global business, what are the necessary fields in other areas? What does Europe use? How can we make sure that we are staying consistent across the business? And then going through and applying that to the historical data, going back and filling in empty fields that you've determined are important, and likewise trying to deduplicate and get rid of the historical data that is not adhering to your agreed upon standards. The business process alignment is a huge piece of this, and this has nothing really to do with technology. This has everything to do with sitting together with the various teams responsible for data and mapping out who touches each piece of data. Where does it come from? What are the where should it go? What are cases in which somebody else should be looking at it? And this is going to be completely specific to the business. This means that you have to understand what are your requirements for reporting, right? If you are subject to review by the FDA, maybe you have to hold on to, maybe you have a certain approval standard that you need. Maybe you have to hold on to records when some piece of data in items changes, for example. And as much as possible in approaching MDM, it's also a good time to look at those processes and say, okay, where can we simplify? Where can we possibly automate or standardize across the business lines? Of course, organizations are going to be somewhat resistant to change, but I think wherever possible, these sorts of business process alignment changes are actually ultimately going to improve employee experience, because they're going to have a very clear understanding of what they're responsible for and who they pass along to. Likewise, all the way from the top, they know who they can reach out to when they're following up on a specific element of data or a specific area of data. There's a clear understanding from a role perspective, not from an individual perspective, who is responsible for what. And I think this means that for a lot of organizations, the starting place has to be sitting in a room with a whiteboard and drawing out from a global perspective, what does this look like? What does a single piece of customer data go through from the various elements? Who creates that from the beginning? And where can you create rules and automated processes to make that less keystrokes, less time spent on someone's desk, and wherever possible as uniform across the business as possible. And that's another thing to keep in mind in the process side. I've alluded to it a couple of times, but in some cases, approaching master data management will be something that happens, let's say, in North America, right? You understand that the US business needs to create some sort of data management process, and they'll design it around the way things are done in North America without taking into account perhaps different regulation standards or different processes in Europe that then mean that the solution that you've implemented first in the US isn't compatible with the way things are done in Europe. And that is going to just further the problem of silos, because then what happens is you're going to have to design a different system in Europe that won't properly match what's going on in the US. So that's an important thing. Even where you know that you'll start in one location, you have to think globally and get them involved early on to ensure that whatever you're establishing can be replicated across the business. So there's a lot on this. This is a busy slide, but I wanted to give a sense of some of the roles that exist in this data creation process, and some of the processes you see on the left that are involved. Of course, there's a lot to this, but in some cases, it will be less busy than this. There maybe you only need, maybe you have the same people as data owners and data stewards, or in some cases, you may feel that a data governance, specific data governance group isn't as necessary as really strong business-specific data stewards who are understanding of the requirements set on their business unit for data quality and also data fields and where they have to pass that along to. But this is a good place to look for how does this match, how do you match your processes to this? Who or what role is responsible for each of these elements? And so then one of the areas that gets talked about a lot in master data management, specifically because there's an incentive from the software companies to try and sell you on their latest and greatest MDM tool, technology is often an important piece of master data management. It's not the most important piece of master data management, and it's not an area that companies should start with. The most important parts are understanding the data and the process first, and then figuring out how do you design a technology, or how do you pick a technology solution that most closely matches your specific needs. In some cases, this can be an easily developed homegrown solution, right? If it's a smaller organization, maybe what they need is just a good, low budget tool that creates alert systems for when there's a piece of data sitting in your queue. And other than that, it's just about defining the process. But in a lot of cases, master data management tools can be a really helpful way to ensure lasting change. Once you've done the business process alignment and had an agreed upon data, sort of master data elements, you've decided what you're going to master, then you want to find a technology solution that enforces the rules that you've set out, that passes along the business process with the right approval workflow. And it's very difficult when you're working across a patchwork of applications and ERPs. Sometimes, you'll have multiple different ERPs. Maybe you've gone through some acquisitions and you've continued to allow those subsets of the business to operate on their legacy systems without properly integrating. And in those cases, having a tool that can integrate with those various silos is really key. It's not going to be, there may be a feeling that it's best to invest in an MDM solution from your ERP provider, but in a lot of cases, those won't integrate properly with your homegrown applications or with your third-party applications, and then you're right back where you started with not having proper uniform data standards and a proper data management flow. So the right software should be very much customized to your needs, and you should engage software providers once you have a clear idea of those needs, not earlier than that. There's a tendency to be wooed by a software provider and then try to reverse engineer your processes to fit their software. And that's going to just raise the amount of change, human change that has to happen, the amount that you have to adapt your people to this new process. So as much as possible, you want to make the process specific to your company and then create the technology or implement the technology solution around that. So there's minimal friction. And as an anecdote to this, there really are some disaster cases of, we were working with a large pharmaceutical company, and they were trying to endeavor a full master data management implementation, and they brought on one of the big consulting firms. They did a multi-million-dollar study. They determined, okay, this big multi-million-dollar MDM platform is going to be best for you because it has all the bells and whistles you could possibly want. And in the end, two of their key applications didn't integrate properly with that software. And Hamiltonian Systems, we were brought in to rescue that project with a way lower budget software that was much more customizable to what they needed and that integrated properly with all the tools that they needed to continue to use to stay FDA compliant. And so that was rescuing a multi-million-dollar investment that was done by an outside consultant without properly engaging IT and the business. So this really does happen a lot, and it's important to realize that technology is only a piece of the puzzle. And speaking a little bit more to technology in MDM, there's sort of two top-tier MDM types. One is analytical and the other is operational. Analytical MDM is much more of a one-directional pulling from the various silos to give a view of some piece of master data. And this can be easier because it's a little bit less disruptive to try and implement first. However, having one-directional MDM does mean that you don't properly push that data back out to the various systems. And this means that you're not giving, for example, sales can push their information to your MDM so that you can then try to get a holistic view. But it doesn't see the full value of master data management, where if you pushed data back out to sales, they can get a more holistic view from the other areas of the business, and they actually will be able to do better at their work. So analytical MDM is sort of a lower level to operational MDM, which of course is more difficult because it does mean bidirectionally synchronizing your data in real time. And this means that you have to synchronize your business processes. This is what I've sort of been talking about in approaching master data management. This means that you've already agreed upon what you're mastering, what are the key elements that everybody is responsible for, who has the golden record on one field versus another field, and then you have the processes aligned so that they're all feeding in the pieces that they're responsible for, and they're receiving back the pieces that others are responsible for that will help them do their business. And so this is the Forrester maturity model levels. Operational are the top two. And plenty of major organizations, major companies are in level 1 and level 2, right? They may have realized the value of some kind of data management within a silo, within an application, and they haven't yet tried to bring those silos together. And so it is a higher cost, higher risk of failure, higher requirements for change the higher you get up in the maturity model. And another way to look at maturity levels through a little bit more of a qualitative description. These are some of the areas: governance, quality, metadata, provisioning, and metrics that are good to look at. And so you may have a split. You're in a good spot with perhaps with metrics. You have good data cleanup on the back end, but you're way behind on data governance. This is a useful way to sort of assess your own organization's maturity in MDM. And this, I've sort of touched on all of these pieces, but again, worth reiterating that it is all too common that companies overinvest on technology, and then they may find themselves either underutilizing their MDM tool or overutilizing their MDM tool, where certain things that they're doing should not be done. That's not the best process for it. Using the bells and whistles of the tool isn't necessarily the quickest or most effective way to undertake a specific process. Yeah, this is a good way to look at technology when you're evaluating technology. There'll be different things that they offer across these 5 pillars. And so when you get to that stage, it's good to have somebody who can help you in the process of selecting a tool. But there's a big process that happens ahead of time in just assessing what you need, what the processes are. Again, this is more on assessing your requirements specifically ahead of selecting a tool. And then lastly, data governance. Data governance is a massive piece of master data management. This is about setting policies and figuring out how do you ensure everyone follows these policies and these rules. So there are 2 approaches to this. I've alluded to a little bit earlier: centralized versus disparate authority. In many cases, when undertaking this kind of change, if there isn't already someone responsible for data governance, that needs to be created. Adding people to data governance can sound like a drain to the business, but it actually typically delivers much more value than cost, and is a really helpful way to ensure that all areas of the business are staying true to those policies, because there needs to be some kind of authority that has been granted from the top that is respected in guiding data across the business. Otherwise, there's no way to really make that happen, and different areas of the business will pay attention to it as to the degree that they see value in it, not to the highest extent necessary for the business as a whole to see value from MDM. And so in a lot of cases, what this means is a data governance or master data management team. But for some organizations, they may say our data is it's good for us to have disparate authority, to have ground level folks who understand the realities of the process, understand the data, and can be accountable just for their area, and then trust that it flows in properly as long as each of those sort of business level authorities, assuming that they've followed the processes properly, that they can then flow together into the golden record, and that can be used then back in the other direction. And these are the key elements of data governance. This is basically executing on the process that was mapped out in Pillar 2. This is how do you establish the decision-making and the approval process, and how do you enforce that? How do you handle exceptions? Where does the final say lie with some kind of data change that requires proper approval? If there's a dispute, who has the authority over approving a piece of data? So a little bit about building a business case, because this is an important piece of MDM, right? Sometimes there'll be a sponsor or some people in a specific business unit who understand the value, and there will be other times that management will say, okay, if we're taking on MDM, let's kick this to IT. And that's a huge mistake. So what's important for building the business case is putting it into business terms, right? Often, if you come to the business, budget control folks and say, we want to do master data management, or we want to invest in an MDM tool and do process change, that may not be as attractive to them as putting it in the terms of what does it do for the business, right? So if you're trying to invest in customer master data management, you can put it in terms of, customer experience optimization, right? Or even just going in and saying, here's what you will be able to do with a more holistic view of this piece of master data. A great example of, an issue that I had recently with a company where it was clear to me as a customer that they didn't have good master data management was actually with my gas provider, where I had a roommate who had the gas in her name who was moving out. I took over gas for the building. And when I went into their online system, I put in that I was taking over gas for the building. And she went in and said, I'm canceling gas for, I'm canceling my service. And they didn't have proper master data management on our property level, right? It shouldn't be on an individual level that these, that the order was created to shut off gas. But what ended up happening is her request to shut off service issued a work order for someone to come turn our gas off. And my request to transfer service didn't then cancel that issue, that work order. Instead, it just said, okay, this person will start taking over billing. And so what happened is they turned off our gas, and there was nobody, then we were without gas, and there was no work order to come turn it back on. And I had to be, my roommates, just as it got cold, we were without heat for a week. And that's an area where they just didn't have good view on the address level of their customers, right? They didn't have proper synchronization of their processes, and they had a real lack of master data management. That's an area where you could approach the business and say, this is what we want to be able to do, not in technical terms by saying master data management, but in more business terms, because in a lot of cases there are massive cost savings or opportunities for growth that can be created by investing in your master data. So talking about some of the common reasons that MDM projects fail, and I've touched on some of these. Again, approaching it as a technology initiative is not approaching it properly. And if you come away with anything from this, it should be that what this is a holistic approach that needs to happen, that needs to be process alignment, and a conversation that involves folks from the business and IT. And another piece is knowing what elements of data do we need to master? What's going to give us, what are we hoping to accomplish with this project? What sorts of insights would we like to have? And then that can guide what do you approach. Do you want to master customers? Do you want to master your items or your products or your suppliers to be able to get a better understanding of how you engage with them? Understanding the level of the ground level change that has to happen is another big area where MDM projects can go awry. So in a lot of cases, the number one thing that needs to happen as far as time investment is working with the people creating the data. They've done things a certain way for 25 years, 30 years, whatever it is, or they were taught, they're new, but they were taught by somebody who was there for a while. And when you come in with a new process, if it comes in the form of some email or some tool, they'll say, well, this isn't really how things are done. And they may continue to do things in an Excel spreadsheet, or continue to fill out a field of data or the fields of data that they have been taught are important for them, or they'll fill it out the way that they were taught to do that. So in some cases, this means spending time with people in training them on the process that has been agreed upon and on what is expected of them. But in other cases, this can be helped by investing in the right tool. So if the tool shows the fields of data that are important for that person, and it understands when they key in a state with, let's say, with the full state name, they've typed out the full state Massachusetts rather than just MA, it can either do automatic data conversion or just tell them, right, trigger them and say, this isn't the format. This, here's the format that this piece of data is supposed to be entered into. And so there's ways to try and lessen the amount of human change or the amount you have to spend on just retraining people by trying to complement it with a proper technology solution. But no matter what, there is going to be some element of getting people on board, getting business units and IT together to properly address the problem top to bottom. And so our recommendations where we've seen MDM succeed is when there's been a proper understanding from both business and IT, as well as the executive suite on the value, the goals, and the strategy. And that means that prioritizing prioritizing data quality objectives and going after the most business critical processes. In some cases, what needs to happen is an area with the most, where that stands the most to gain from data quality improvements and master data, can try to pilot this project to prove it out. Because no matter what, there needs to be full cross-enterprise understanding of the importance and the goals, so that across, that when it comes to Europe to implement this, they have the same understanding of the value and the goals as the people in the US have, because the same amount of work is going to be required of them in making it happen. And another thing is in the SOA, the architecture battle around SOA, and ensuring that the solutions, the technology solutions will integrate properly with the various silos of data. Wherever data is housed or wherever it is determined that data should be housed, the technology solution has a proper integration with that to be able to pull data together and send it back out to the ERP and to any other applications that will want to use that data. So very briefly, a little bit about Hamiltonian Systems product. As I've said, we're pretty committed to the process in its holistic form. And so in any engagement, we do go about or ensure that the first processes have happened, or we help make those processes happen. And that is in terms of assessing the data and then designing the process. But when the time comes to pick a solution, our data integration platform, Casse, is a really strong, customizable solution that integrates with various ERPs, Oracle, SAP, Microsoft suites, as well as applications through web services, API calls, to be able to pull data together, create that master record, and go through, and in that process, go through whatever the established rules of validation and approval are, so that then when it's being pushed back out into whatever applications or whatever silos of data need that master data, that it's accurate and dependable and up to date. So this is a little bit about the data integration architecture of Kasei, and a little bit about how Kasei works also, that it does access both structured and unstructured data, and has more than just MDM. It has a real ability to be deployed in a variety of contexts with some amount of automation inbuilt, certain amounts of machine learning for wherever that is appropriate. Maybe that's just in, validating address strings and converting them or validating them with the business records. Maybe that's taking item data and identifying duplicates automatically based on certain key pieces. And so those are some really powerful ways that Kasei can help lessen the load on individuals in the business in this master data management project. And very briefly, Moongil is our IoT platform, which we use often for businesses who are just starting their engagement with IoT and want to be able to prove out the concept. So it's a very flexible tool that allows business units to easily set up assets within an IoT platform and develop alerts within their ERP so that they can start to see the potential of IoT. So thank you all very much for joining. We do have some more time before 2 o'clock. If there are any questions, please feel free to submit those. And otherwise, I really appreciate all of you for joining me today. I will be sending out a recorded version of the webinar, and I'm happy to engage further offline with anybody who would like to learn more about anything that was discussed here, or talk to me about Hamiltonian, how we help customers in service, and how we help customers with our product, with Kasei. I do have a question here about, is there value in targeting analytical MDM first, since it's easier, as opposed to trying to do operational MDM first? And what do most companies do? So in this case, I would say there is value in targeting analytical MDM first, depending on the goal. Again, that's going to be very specific to what is the goal of master data management or of implementing data management. And so if the goal of master data management is just to be able to develop proper insights, and to be able to say, okay, we want to show the executive suite, if they ask about a region or a customer or a product, we want to be able to show them the relevant elements of data. That's where analytical MDM can handle that without having to sort of disrupt the business. And that just means that you are converting, in some cases, you're taking data and reconciling differences, converting them into a golden record, and then usually feeding that into some kind of business analytics or business intelligence tool. But if the goal of MDM is to be able to sort of empower the business to operate with better data, which in a lot of cases can be more valuable for transforming, the actual business units, then that's where starting with operational MDM and approaching the whole process, that's going to be really important. Analytical MDM is a good starting place, but it's really one directional, and maybe you can feed insights to the executive suite, and they will then go back and try and make changes to the business, but you're not fixing underlying data quality problems. And most companies, I would say, are and right now, if they haven't approached MDM at all, they're typically going right for operational MDM, or they're trying to prove out operational MDM within a few silos of the business. Analytical MDM is less popular because it doesn't address the underlying problems. It can mostly then just arrange data in a way that helps to report or give an insight. It doesn't fix the problems within the various silos. So thank you all very much for joining. I appreciate it. And again, I will share this recording, which you are welcome to forward along to anyone who you think would benefit from this. We will send out more information about our next webinar, which will be in January. That's going to be about IoT specifically and about how to prove the value of IoT within a limited use case. And so we'll speak more about our platform Moongill in that webinar. Thank you very much.